Hello, welcome to Excel Highway. In today's video, I want to share with you a company budget file that I created on Google Sheets. If you want to manage your company's budget, whether you're a small company or a big company, then you really will find this file useful for you. You can manage your employee base, your expenses, and your income. And I also build it in a way that you can build recurring events, events that change every year, every month, etc., and even use different currencies. All right, I want you to stick around and I'll walk you through the file, how to use it. Let's start with the HR budget sheet. In the HR budget sheet, we have a few columns. Now, throughout the file, blue columns are input, orange columns are formulas. You select a department, all right? That list is coming from here. So if I add a department, new department, go back here, it immediately appears, go back, delete it, and it's gone. All right. And these drop downs are really nice, so you can just start typing in and it's going to find whatever it is you're searching for. So you select the department, you key in the role. This is not a drop down because, in my opinion, these can be very changeable. So, of course, another drop down list can be created for that. I didn't do that. Name of that person, when that person started, or maybe they will start in the future, and if they have an end date. It could be a futuristic end date or an end date in the past. Their monthly salary and the currency. Currency also a drop down. Drop down. Before I continue with the demonstration, I want to mention that this file will be available to you on my Patreon page on a paid subscription. Yes, it's a paid subscription, but it's your way of helping me as a creator, and I'm going to give back 3 times or 4 times as much as you will have access to this file and many, many more. So it's going to be available on my Patreon page and also on my Etsy shop. Links in the description or comments below. So I hope you will contribute and get this great file and hope you will find a lot of value with it. Are coming from here. So in the currencies, set the currency that you want to work with and what is the company budget rate for, in this case, US dollars. I built this file for US dollars, but you can do it to whatever currencies you are working with. Now, why keep that as a static number? Because the rates change all the time. So, and you build the budget on a specific date for the next year or two or five or whatever. So you want to remain with whatever exchange rate you thought was the exchange rate for planning purposes. Okay, so you might want to use that as well. You can use the dynamic one, but I don't recommend it because it's going to change all the time. So uh, this cell will show you basically the last month that will be generated for this row. It depends on whether or not there's an end date, but also in the summary on the budget end date. So the budget start and end date is what builds this entire table, the pivot table and everything else. So whatever I have here, now if I want to use December 24, then now the end date will be December 24, except for the ones that have um, um, another date. Like for them, the date is actually July, for example. So that's their end date. In date range, that's a helper column for me, and roll number, that's also a helper column for me. So you fill this out, all the roles, and of course you can fill that out as much as you want. Then we go over to the expense budget. Expense budget, you have a category. As you can imagine, that should be a list. Then you have the expense itself, which may or may not be a list. In this case, I elected to have it as a free text. Then you have the cadence. The cadence means how often does this expense occur? Because usually expenses are not a one-time thing. Like For example, office supplies, printer maintenance, let's say it's a quarterly expense. It started in January. There's no end date because it's a constant expense. And whenever, as long as we have a printer, we need to pay for it. That's the amount. That's the monthly amount. Sorry, that's the quarterly amount. That's the amount for that period. And that's the currency. Basically, what it means that the way this is built, this expense will appear from January and then every 3 months because it's quarterly. It's once per quarter. So the first time was January. The next time would be March. So let me just show you how it looks in the summary. So if I go to expenses, or I can do it here actually. Go to expenses and office supplies. There's the printer. So you see it's 200 in January, then 0 and 0, 200 in April, 0, 0, 200 in July. That's because I selected a quarterly event. You can see here a monthly event every month, and we'll look at the other options. So that's a quarterly event. The monthly event, that's the every month that you saw. There's also an annual event. We can just change that to annually, and it should already impact that line. So now you see it annually. You see it in January, and you won't see it anymore because my end date is September. If I change my end date to February 25, give it a second to refresh because a lot of things are happening in the background. I see it again in January. See, that's the annual part. Let's bring it back to September. So I think that's pretty nice that you can change the cadence and it's just gonna roll out. And even if the start date is in the past, so if now the start date, let's say, is February, remember we had an event in January and then the next one is April. Even if now I start in February, I won't see anything for February, anything for March, and the next one is April. So it doesn't matter when the start and end date is. It knows when um, the next event should happen, especially if it's quarterly or annually, since there's not monthly, which is always. And there's also the one time that's going to appear only once. So travel, business travel, for example, you're only going to see it once, no matter what the dates are. It's only going to appear in January. And of course, if your start date is after, then you won't see it at all. So that's the cadence. That's the start date. That's the end date. Now the start date and end date are also in the list and they're here. And the dates, I want the first day of the month every time. And I don't want it to be a free date selection because when you're building a budget on a minimum base, you're looking at a monthly budget, quarterly, yearly, 5 year. I don't know. You don't really want to have a budget that's very, you know, date specific because that can really be difficult to create something like that. So I work in a monthly bucket, so this is the only date that you need to change, and it's always E date, which is advancing it by 1 month, keeping it on the first. So it's always going to be the first of the day. Whenever you see a date, it's the first, and you have to select it, not a free text. Same for the end date. Amount, currency, and then you have some helping columns. That's going to show you this basically all of these columns are supposed to eventually calculate when is the next start date. When's your next event to have that expense? All right, let's talk about the income forecast sheet. This is where you forecast your revenue. Now I build it in a way that you have a customer type, a monthly income, and the number of customers that match that category. So you get a total monthly income. You can build this on an item level or on a service type or whatever you want, as long as you have some sort of a value, a monthly value. Then there's a start date and end date, just like before, and a growth plus the cadence. So this basically means that, for example, customer A, this group starts in May at 33,000, but grows by 3% every month. Or customer B group is 32,500, grows by 10% every quarter or annually, or this could be even blank, so it's the same flat number. You decide. Um, so it's very changeable because usually customers have change. You could also have it as a negative number, right? Whatever you want. Let me show you how it looks, and we can make changes. So this is the income category. You can see every customer. So you can see customer B starts in January or before, and it's every 3 months. You see 1, 2, 3, then it grows by a certain percent. Customer C starts in July. We don't see the change. Customer D starts in April. We don't see any change. And customer A, which is monthly, grows every month by 3%. So if I go here to the income, let's say now I do minus 3%. So now this number drops by 3%. Or if I change this to, I don't have anything here. So it's just going to be static 33%. So it's very customizable. So once you set up the budget for your HR, your budget for your expense, the income forecast, all of these sheets, which I'll not go into, basically convert everything into a method that you can use for pivot tables. And then I have two summaries here. I have what I call the currency summary, where you have the current exchange rate. Okay, that's using Google Finance to US dollars. I have the budget rate, which is what I showed you before over here. And then I'm going to compare them. So this is going to be just a pivot table with a summary by quarter. So every quarter in my range, what was my euro, British pound, and dollar amount. And then it's going to show it everything in US dollars. So it's going to convert it to US dollar and the delta between what I thought was my rate and what is my current rate. So I think it's a nice analysis that you can review. And of course, you have the full summary where you can have a real deep dive into all of your categories and expenses, and you can see which months you're balanced, which months you're not balanced, where you have too much expenses, your HR situation, etc., etc. Use slicers and dicers, and you can add more slicers if you want. And over here is where you also change the date as I showed you. So it could be up until, let's say, April 25, and you just have to change it there, and it will change automatically in the pivot table and just show you everything based on that. So I hope you enjoyed this demonstration of the company budget file. If you did, please make sure to subscribe and hit that like button.